questions, but generally speaking, the questions, especially like the one number 4 that was looking at how do we safeguard the rights of the people and nature. We need to have a way of bringing the people back to the basics. For example, in the days of our parents, there was something called Bulungi Bwansi, where the community would come together and clean the community, ensure they have planted trees, but this has so been forgotten. We need to have a mindset change of some sort, where people now take ownership of ensuring that all the plastic that is littered is collected, and after it being collected, it is not just banned, but it is recycled. We need to have good practices, like, from, there are places like, say, the leadership where we might not have a voice. Say, maybe if you look at the president, we might not be able to influence him directly, but if we have campaigns carried out in the communities, and when you look at communities, we're looking at the families. Can we start with the families? There was a campaign that was spoken about of planting 4 million trees. Imagine if each family is tasked to plant, say, 10 trees, we will even beat that 4 million record. So can we go back to, instead of having just the central region doing something or just the northern region, we have a worldwide campaign where each family is tasked to plant trees to ensure that their community is clean, to ensure that, we don't have plastic disposed of. When you dispose of plastics just like that, it later affects the drainage system, which will later lead to having a lot of stagnant water, which will result into a lot of disease, which will then lead to less activity, less economic activities, which will lead to increase in poverty. So really, all these are interlinked. The other issue was about localizing some of these policies. Uganda has one of the best policies. Someone talks about the environmental policy. We have very many policies in NEMA, but these policies are just kept in the shelves. So is there a way we can localize them? And when we talk about localizing, we're not saying turning them into local languages, but rather ensuring that the local person, the local me who has never stepped in school, is able to understand that this is what I am meant to do. For example, there is a gentleman who uses arts to ensure that the community understands the effects of climate action through art, and they collect young people together, they express their views, they draw them, and when they go back home, they're able to put action to what they were actually drawing, because then they can see it. And like, they say if you want to hide anything from an African person, you put it in writing. Can we take out these policies from writing and try to visualize them? Try, when you go to the community, it's not about holding just dialogues, but then having the young people practically get involved and, tasking them and following them up. There was a young person who asked about feedback. We have these dialogues and consultations, but then the feedback, we don't know what has happened after the meeting. So after Stockhom+50, how will the young people at the grassroots then know what they're supposed to carry on and how they're supposed to act? Then recycling. We need to ensure that we encourage the households to recycle, not only thinking of the big companies doing the recycling, because we may not have all the funds to ensure that everyone has a big company, but in our households, in our homes, instead of throwing away plastic or instead of buying a Kavera, can we have these Sisomed bags to go shopping with? Can we use these plastic bottles for maybe vessels or something other than throwing them away or burning them? Then we looked at Bulungi Bwansi was really, that Bulungi Bwansi, that's what it was called name. Maybe we could get a better fancy name since we are young people, but to ensure that we have the community much more involved in climate action activities. It's not only about planting trees, it is about ensuring that you are not disposing off in the wrong places. You're not using these plastics and just throwing them out of your car window. And it is also carrying out campaigns to see that the people in those policy-making positions are able to know that please don't give away our forests to sugarcane growers. Please do not give away this swamp to maybe company X, because the swamps are the ones that help us distill the water that then it goes to the lakes. So that was our discussion online. And I want to thank everyone online who participated. And maybe as I conclude, we need to look at collaborations and multi-stakeholder stakeholder engagements. For example, if we're looking at climate action, how do we bring in the Ministry of Education? How bring in the Ministry of Health? How do we bring in the different civil society organizations to make sure that they make a contribution towards ensuring climate action? Because as you know, everything that happens in our environment later on reflects on our health, on our education, and on the different aspects of the community. Thank you so much, and I'm hoping I've represented my online group well. Thank you. I remain Linda Saba from the United Association of Uganda.
Thank you very much, Linda. We appreciate that input. Kindly itemize the points and send them to the email that has been provided in the chat room. We shall appreciate receiving those items as soon as possible, preferably in a day or so. So unfortunately, we can't interact with Linda because of online restrictions. So we appreciate the input for the people who have been online. We shall be able to get in touch with them and get their contributions. With that now, I would like to invite, which group is ready, IT? I think you sent in your material. Can you project group 3 with group 1?
We can group that. No, first way. It's the SC 2. Group 2.
So we have about 10 minutes for presentation for each group, and then possibly another 10 minutes for quick questions and answers, so that we are done by 4 o'clock, so that people who are traveling far are able to move. IT, are we ready? Group 2. Rapporteur for group 2, please come and make your presentation. Rapporteur or chairman? Missing in action. The whole group is missing in action. This is the brave one. Is the rapporteur? Okay.
Thank you. We are here to represent Group 2, and I'd request maybe our members to say hello. Thank you. Earlier we were only 4 until we were charged with the task of discussing the topic how we can achieve a sustainable and inclusive recovery from coronavirus disease. And we had several questions. I want to invite the chairperson. He's actually representing the chairperson. Our chairperson decided to hide. Not actually hiding, please.
Thank you so much, our rapporteur. Our chairperson has given me instructions to ably represent the group. And we want to thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doctor. For us, our work was very easy to form a nexus between climate change and health, because we realized that climate change has a very close relationship with what happened with COVID-19. And as our rapporteur will be giving our presentation, for us, we emphasized what should be the sustainable and inclusive plan that we should have in place to ensure that there is a post-COVID-19 recovery. That was very, very important. But most important, we looked at what could be the issues to do with green jobs, green investments, green innovations to be able to tap into the future. And our presentations were so much on innovation and to see that how do we sustainably recover from the COVID-19 as a country, but also as individuals, as my brother will be giving. Mr. Rapporteur, sir, I can take over. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question specifically asked us to enumerate the most promising sustainable and inclusive recovery practices that are currently being practiced by the different public, private, civil society groups, and then individuals and communities, cities, regional and country levels. And specifically looking at how very good initiatives can be scaled up. So one of the initiatives that we identified and highlighted is the government effort that was put in place to help the SMEs to access finances at low interest rates. I remember when the COVID hit, a lot of companies and organizations were hit so hard. Some of them had to scale down operations. And we looked at that as a positive when government tried to give access to finances at very low interest rates. So we also think that we can scale that up through increasing the awareness about this particular program, because not so many entities, SMEs, know about this program. As much as it's good, but we need more and concerted efforts to create awareness. We also note that just recently, government has launched the Parish Development Model, which also in part is highlighted as a model that can be used as a means of recovery from the pandemic, but also to propel Uganda to the middle income status. So it's a two-sword program. And we are saying, yes, this is a very, very good program. However, we think that there's need to include all stakeholders in the implementation of this program, and particularly taking interest in monitoring, because the program seems to be good. It may have loopholes, but generally it's good. However, we fear that if other groups of society, especially civil societies, are not involved in the monitoring, it may not work. So we think that this can be scaled up by way of including all stakeholders, especially civil society organizations, who will be doing social accountability along with the different groups of society. For example, the youth being the main demographic. Also, the other initiative is the 20% given to savers by NSSF as a means of helping them to recover. We say that yes, even though we do not have the exact statistics to highlight the extent of success of this program, but we think that yes, as a response developed towards recovery, it's good. However, there's not so much awareness about it. So most of our means of scaling up seem to go to awareness, because this is where the biggest challenge seems to be. So we can do awareness to scale it up, because then when awareness is created, many people become knowledgeable about the program and they can apply. But we also think that a specific focus should be put in making easy the application process and then the release of funds, because most people apply, but it takes time. Probably some will receive after COVID. So we think it can be scaled up by easing that process. And then we also highlighted the current efforts that are given towards carbon credits, where certain entities and governments, I think this is also coming from the Green Climate Fund, that for each tree that you plant, there's a credit that you get. Not so many people are aware about this. So again, we are saying that this can be scaled up by creation of more awareness, probably the line ministries, NGOs at national and grassroots levels, especially, should be made aware of this and included in the process of sensitization. But also, there is need to increase climate financing. And if we have enough climate financing, which we don't, I think there's also we think there's need for proper accountability for the funds, especially that are usually given towards climate financing. Please scroll. So we also have seen NGOs and other civil society organizations create funds, innovation funds, for especially awarding to people who have contributed to developing solutions for recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And yes, we think this is good. It's a very good initiative, but this can be scaled up by the government partnering with these CSOs and doing this at a more elaborate, at a very elaborate level, so that we are able to reach the last person down there, the most vulnerable. We also have seen some private companies, such as Coca-Cola, incentivizing recycling processes, specifically buying containers and bottles back from the community. Even though this happened, or was rather happening before the COVID-19, we still think that the fact that they continue doing it is also means that they are offering an approach that they're offering to help the communities. But this is also not widely known. We think that these companies, Coca-Cola in particular, should create more awareness, of course, with the responsible government agencies, for example, NEMA, NFA, and others. Although there's also an aspect of corporate social responsibility, but perhaps we look at that when we go down. The second question we're looking at is the current recovery and pre-existing practices that need to be changed to ensure inclusive and sustainable recovery. So basically there, we looked at it in a manner that, yes, there are a lot of initiatives and approaches developed, but there are those that are really, really wanting. So that is the perspective that we are looking at it from. And one of them is the automatic promotions in schools and other higher learning institutions. Yes, this is very good because a lot of time obviously was cut. Our students missed out. But now, as much as it's good and time sensitive, but we think that there are a lot of half-baked graduates that are being produced, and yet they must be graduated. So we think that there should be innovative ways of making sure that these out of school fresh graduates are able to keep up with the knowledge in the field. So we think that maybe do a lot of apprenticeship programs, develop online learning tools that they can continuously use even when they go to the field, so that we really don't have people doing what they don't know. We are also still highlighting the innovative funds by CSOs. So we also think that this is good, as we highlighted earlier, but we still need to do a lot of coordination and make sure that the efforts are put right so that the action is publicized and well seen. And then we also highlighted the social welfare funds. We call it the Nabanja money. That was given to the most vulnerable, But the vulnerable in this sense are those that were made vulnerable by COVID-19, but not the broader definition of the vulnerable. Even though it's a very good thing, we have questions about one, how the vulnerable were really identified as vulnerable. We have some cases where the deputy RDC and other people were the first to receive the 100,000. But we also recognize the need to have an emergency fund, emergency welfare fund, welfare and recovery, we can call it. However, we think that there should be a proper framework that should be used country over to implement such funds, not just when there is an emergency, a pandemic, and then we start running up and about. But key is that even though that welfare fund is there, the framework for its implementation is very crucial. The other thing that, the other practice that we've seen in the recent times of COVID-19 in Uganda here is the supplementary financial requests, usually by ministries. We think that this is good because it's for the good of the people. However, it is usually at high-end level. It is only the members of parliament who discuss this issue. Some of them are bought, and then the local man is not involved. So we think that these supplementary budgets to respond to pandemics such as COVID, in as much as they are good, but it should be inclusive enough. So they should usually be taken to the lowest level of the budget cycle. That is the village. Even though there are time issues, but at least we can do that the way we are doing these consultations, about 5 of them next week. The other efforts are also vaccination. We know for sure that for us to talk about recovering fully from COVID-19, then we cannot run away from the talk about vaccination. But the approach here is really wanting. I think we think that Uganda is among the least countries that have implemented in terms of vaccination. So we think it's good. We should have a programmatic framework for such initiatives. Our third question is asking about how we ensure that all countries or communities can benefit from opportunities stemming from sustainable and just transition. We prefer to look at it from rather a community level. And even though we know that at country level, we should be talking about it, polluter pay principle, all those things, but we think that it is very crucial to have this at, from a perspective of a grassroots person. So we think that one of the things that should be done is consultations at grassroots level. For whatever program, let the idea come from the people down there, and we break the concept in a way that they understand this whole aspect. We can talk about the bigger issues of negotiations at higher end level, but we need to translate this to a language that the common man understands. And then citizen and solutions journalism should be promoted. We see that obviously there's a lot of work going on in terms of response to restoration, conservation efforts, and the bigger biodiversity concept, but they are not highlighted. So we think that there should be promotion of citizen and solutions journalism, so that the initiatives and the voices from the last person down there are heard, and whatever programs are developed at high-end level, they should be based on such initiatives because they are community-owned and community-driven. And then we also think that one of the tools that can be used is a multi-sectoral approach. and promotion of gender inclusivity. We also looked at community-centered modeling, and also we think that there should be acceleration on the legal and policy framework by government to implement and account for the funds received from climate financing, specifically the Green Climate Fund. Usually we have issues about our NDCs and they relate to accountability. So we think that should be done. Question 4, particularly tasked us to talk about how we can create better performing industries and supply chains for a just transition to more sustainable economies. And going further to highlight the most crucial sector. First of all, we recognize the fact and the need for every sector to be involved. They all play a role. When we talk about conservation, it's everyone's responsibility. Every ministry, agency should have some budget towards conservation in all their programs. But we think that ICT is very key in accelerating performance of these industries and also the value chain, moving all digital marketing for these products, online shopping, online apps that aid all this. We think ICT infrastructure or sector is very necessary. Of course, transport for the linkages and to move freight here and there, it is also very key. The agricultural sector itself, we talk about agroforestry and every other thing. It's a very key sector. And then the latest talk in town, minerals, energy, and natural resource, that sector is very crucial. And we emphasize that the communities should particularly be involved in any resource utilization, or rather we should have resource sharing with communities in a way of business, community agreements. And then, of course, the environment sector is very key in all this. We are talking environment and health. So the environment sector is key in all this, and we are saying that this is mainstreamed in all sectors, like I highlighted earlier, that Ministry of Agriculture can also have conservation efforts, just like any other ministry should. And then the obvious health sector, we all saw what the COVID-19 pandemic did. It broke everybody down. Question 5 was specifically tasking us to come up with some of the commitments and responsible principles that need to be made by key industry actors and by finance and investment institutions. And very quickly, we note that there should be an effort to strengthen environmental impact assessments by all sectors and stakeholders, right from the community level. And then corporate accountability and corporate social responsibility. We particularly think that all investors, all companies, especially multilaterals, should have community development agreements that they should sign with the communities where they're going to be producing or manufacturing from, so that the community acts as a tool for accountability in itself. Because even though they are going to ask for their 10%, along the way they can ask where the other 90% is going. So we think that is very critical. And then our investment code is very poor as a country. So we think that the investment code must be very environmentally friendly and responsive in a way that every company or business, after doing an environment impact assessment, should dedicate a budget beyond corporate social responsibility to conservation. And then we also say that some of the institutions charged with holding investment actors accountable should be strengthened and empowered. We note that some of these guys who should be holding the other guys accountable are not doing what they should do. So they should be strengthened, or more efforts to fight corruption in those ministries and agencies should be developed. And then we also think that the best person to do checks and balances on anybody, any business, is the local person. So we think that there is need for more efforts to empower citizens. This empowerment is in terms of holistic human capital development. And then we also noted that the National Environment Management Authority has very few environment policies. And yet, this is a very critical area. This is a global concern. It's a very sensitive agency. So we think that they should increase the manpower in terms of the environment police. You will be shocked that some people do not even know that environment police exist. And we also think more sensitization about climate change, especially by the Climate Change Committee of Parliament. They are doing a good work, but not good enough. And then our last question is asking us about the decent green jobs of the future, and what are some of the new skills needed from business, from government, and then from academia especially. So we think that a lot of decent green jobs are going to be around tree economy or tree wealth. It's a concept that we should promote. We should interest the young people, ourselves, and other young people. It's a very good concept, and it's a two-edged sword. Whereas we interest them to do tree economy and gain wealth from trees, we are also achieving more green cover for Mother Earth. So it's one of the key employing areas. And then agroforestry, obviously. And then also research on biodiversity and climate related issues and solutions. That's also a key employment area going forward. And then ICT initiatives, of course, we all can't run away from that now. So ICT is going to employ a lot of young people about developing innovations that are related to environment. And we also look at agriculture as a key sector that will give green jobs. And then biogas production and awareness campaigns is also another decent job, green job. And then marketing, obviously, all these technology products that are developed under the green economy. Marketing is key. And then tourism, because a lot of conservation efforts are made in the tourism industry. And yeah, we think it is another opportunity for green employment. And then the new skills for academia, we particularly think that coding, virtual realities are very, very important skills that the academia should take up seriously and involve their students. Apprenticeship, obviously, biased to agencies or entities that are promoting green employment. And then we particularly recommend action-based research by the academic gurus. And then development of a market-driven curriculum. We think that that is a game changer. It leads up to the employment opportunities in the green economy. And then under business, we basically highlighted three, that is marketing skills, and then proactive business, which is able to influence curriculum. We would love to see a situation where the business community, for example, through private sector foundation, Ministry of Trade, UMA and others, come on a round table discussion with the Ministry of Education and tell them that, look, this is what we want. These are the type of jobs we are going to have in the next 5, maybe 50 years. So teach your students how to do this. And then business innovation, obviously, even the way the adverts should now change, should be in a way that is biased to conservation. And then for government, we basically highlighted too, that the Ministry of Trade should engage the private sector on development matters, just like the Ministry of Education should engage businesses. And then the government should support the initiative of volunteerism. We think that it's a very big challenge in Uganda, whereas the government should be promoting. There's a lot of people who are putting money to be hired as a volunteer. So that is us, group 2, unless I left anything.
Thank you very much, group 2. You have taken all your time and even borrowed from my time. But the ideas were very interesting. That's why I let them complete their contribution. I will allow 1 or 2 quick responses before we move to the next group. Given that we have this time scenario, I think we shall receive these inputs, and then we shall see how to clean them up, prioritize them, because as I said, we really need very few concrete recommendations, but we shall receive them and work on them and eventually present them later on for validation. Any 2 quick responses, questions to the presentation? Looks like everybody is satisfied. Means they did a good job? Okay, let's give them another loud applause. Okay, could we have the next group? Group 1, chairperson, you are going to present? Both of you. Okay, fine. You come forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mariam Havila Mirembe. I am a senior green ambassador and a climate activist with Uganda's Little Hands Go Green. And I am the chair for the leadership group 1. And this is
well, thank you so much. My name is Ronald Nahura. I'm a lawyer by profession. I'm a climate change activist, but I'm also an environmentalist. So I happen to be the rapporteur of Leadership Group 1. She's the lady chairperson. Thank you.
okay. So question 1. How can we restore and regenerate a positive relationship with nature? List 2 or 3 good practices and pathways that you would like to see scaled up to enable a move to a healthy planet. So when we look at restoration and regeneration towards a positive relationship with nature, our youngest climate activist in the room, Ethel, suggested our first recommendation, and I think we should give her a hand of applause for that. Because she's only 8 years old, and she can be able to participate in such conferences with us. She suggested that we should plant more trees and end deforestation. In that way, we are improving on our relationship with nature. Sensitizing the masses and creating awareness about the dangers and consequences of environmental destruction will improve the relationship with nature in a way that the different masses acquire knowledge on how to deal with the different climate disruptions. Capacity building was another point. On the point of capacity building, we were looking at increasing the number of people who are taking part in climate action. For example, let me use our organization as an example. Uganda's Little Hands Go Green, we've planted over 1,000 trees across 40 districts in the country. But that is just Uganda's Little Hands Go Green. if, for example, there were different organizations or different individuals doing the same task, we would have a wider number of trees planted and a wider area covered. So that was the point about capacity building. And the other point was about culture. About culture, the main point about culture is creating a tribe. We need to be able to instill passion in the little children or the other youth, our fellow youth, okay? So when you have a wide culture, when you have people that are like-minded with passion towards our environment, this serves us all. You know, I can accomplish something, but with 2 or more people, that is a given culture and more people can do it. And we are working together to make it work for the better for everyone. Pathways, for pathways, we are looking at build-ups towards a certain thing to achieve something. So when you look at conferences, like how we are here right now on workshops, we are here suggesting and sharing knowledge, which we can use later on to build our organizations, to create solutions for our communities, debates, dialogues. Previously in the morning, we had a panel, where we had a breakout session later on, and you were able to ask out your questions to the different individuals that were participating. Climate finance is also another pathway to support climate solutions or innovations that will later develop our communities. So I am going to go to question 3. How marginalized and vulnerable groups benefit from policies and initiatives designed to restore a more sustainable and resilient relationship. When we look at vulnerable groups, I believe, since we are all here due to climate change, we are all vulnerable, right? Do we agree? We are all vulnerable. But most importantly, no, we actually did try to break it down into different categories. We looked at farmers, we looked at children, we looked at the youth, and we looked at women. Is there a point to raise? Yeah, so when we look at farmers, suggested that farmers should have climate smart education that will enable them to have knowledge on how to be able to handle the different climate shocks that affect their plants. In that way, they will not suffer a lot of loss, which will increase their income and be able to support their families. When we look at children deserve climate education. And I don't know how this will surprise you, but when we go out in the fields at schools, children actually pick on this knowledge and they are more driven into this than most adults, respectively. So when a child acquires education about something, they have the passion to go forward and implement it, and it's very hard for them to actually forget it because their mind is like wet cement. What you write on it sticks on it. Inclusion of the youth. Sorry, the screen is inclusion of the youth in climate structures. Yes, as youth, we are also among the vulnerable groups. So when the youth are included in these climate structures and policies and on negotiation tables, you're not only expanding our knowledge, but you're building the future. You're giving us a chance to actually contribute back to our planet. Large companies partnering with SMEs in recycling waste. Okay, so this point is about recycling. And we were looking at a point where the different products from big companies are given back into the communities to support local products, manufacturing. In this way, you're increasing income for the single mothers and the people, and you're improving employment opportunities for the people, and yet in turn, you're recycling products. That is it for now. I'll hand over to Mr. Ronald.
Thank you so much, Lady Chair. I think I'll handle two. You can scroll to question number two. Well, as leadership group one, the other question was, what are the actions that you or the group would take to scale up the change towards a healthy planet? So as a group, we came out with some recommendations, and one of them is to get rid of the use of plastics that are harmful to the environment. So evidence has it that when you dispose of plastic and it goes out into our soils, it will take over 100 years to decompose, which is actually endangering our environment. So one of the actions that we can take to pacify our environment is to get rid of plastics and adopt reusable packaging materials. The other action is create youth community-based groups to build synergies towards the conservation of the environment. So in environmental actions, we've seen the international community and organizations taking up these campaigns and these actions, which doesn't really help. So for us, we are thinking that if we really create youth community-based organizations that really understand the challenges at the ground, will really have a huge impact towards conservation of the environment. Then the other action is community-led triggering in impact mitigation approaches. So how does 2 and 3 differ? Here, what we mean is the small-scale farmer down there in Mayuge, in Sereri, actually knows what they go through every day as a result of climate change. Understand? If you very well know that the locusts that attacked this country were subjected to climate change. So the very consequences that the people in Karamoja, in Kabong, faced as a result of locusts, they really have that direct experience of what it is to face these consequences. So we think through community-led triggering, we will have a much more impact towards the environment. Then the other action is come up with smart technologies that are in line with the environment. You very well know that up country, or even in Kampala here, people are using charcoal to cook. But then why can't we think of using maybe hot plates, you understand? Or EVs, electric vehicles, to get rid of the combustion engine that degrades or that produces carbon emissions to the environment. So we believe that technology is a very important tool in conservation of the environment, and so it should be considered in all the other actions. So the other is climate education to children and youth in institutions to broaden knowledge and action on how to restore and prevent and protect the planet. So we well know that the future of this country is the young generation. So we believe that if the young people, like the young green ambassador here who contributed to this engagement, is really impacted with the spirit of greening the environment, conservation of the environment, then we will be able to have a huge impact in conservation of the environment. Then the other question under 2 was, what are some of the policies and structures that we can put in place to enforce these actions that are being proposed above? So we believe that the government should put up an environmental tax framework. What do we mean? For example, for companies like Coca-Cola, we know that they produce plastics every day. That's where we just had lunch. We are just privileged that we didn't use plastics. But when you go out there, go to restaurants, you'll be able to be given a refreshment under a plastic. So for us to believe that if the government can put up a legal regime that is going to say, look, if you're producing 1,000 plastic bottles, then you should account for it. Can you pay an environmental tax in that regard? So that then will compel these manufacturers to look for alternative solutions. But still under that, we are saying, besides the punitive measures, can we see how we can create incentives for these companies to lure them to scale up recycling of these plastics? Then incorporating climate-related topics in schools, I think that is more of the policy. Can the Minister of Education work around drafting a policy that adopts teaching or taking out lessons to the young people in schools about the beauty of conservation of the environment, the dangers of destruction of the environment? So those were some of the actions, policies, and structures under question number 2. Question number 4, the IT person. So question number 4 is, how can we safeguard the rights of people and nature, including, among others, indigenous people, local communities, environmental defenders, women, youth, and the future generation? So we believe that there is urgent need to educate people about their fundamental human rights and freedoms. So the only way you can alert someone, you know what, you have a cause of action against somebody X, is by letting them know that you actually have a right in that regard. You can't fight for your right unless you know what your right is. So we think that if we go out there and teach the people their fundamental human rights and freedoms, they will be able to speak up about these abuses and all the environmental and the abuse on the environmental rights. So the other way of how they can safeguard these rights is to build collaborative efforts with established community-based organizations in the protection of the environment. So we have organizations, local organizations that work with the local people in sensitizing them, in helping them enforce their human rights. So we think that the international community and all the organizations and development partners should work with the local organizations that know the challenges of the people at the grassroots to help them fight for these rights, instead of funding an organization in the United Kingdom to come and fight for the rights of the people in maybe Masaka. That wouldn't really make a lot of sense. So for us, we are saying, let us build collaborative efforts with community-based organizations. Then translation of the fundamental human rights and freedoms into the indigenous languages. This is actually in our constitution. When you read Article 5 of the constitution, it mandates the government to translate the constitution into all the 56 indigenous languages as provided for under the 3rd schedule of our constitution. Though there is a loophole, but for us, we are saying in follow-up of recommendation 1 of letting the people know their human rights, how is this going to be done? Then let's translate these human rights into the indigenous languages. If you're Kakwa, then you must know that maybe Article 21 of the Constitution guarantees you the right not to be discriminated from society, unlike if it's incorporated in the English version alone. So that's the other recommendation. Then build local court systems adjudicate to human rights abuses and violations. So we wouldn't want to, okay, our urge and our call to government is that besides the court systems that are in place, the different courts of judicature, can we have tribunals at maybe parish levels that are going to adjudicate to these abuses against the environment, against women, against children? So we think if justice shall be served, then let's bring tribunals at community level, then avail free legal services in pursuit of justice. You know that very few people can afford legal services in this country. You understand? My chance, you know that there is a violation of your rights, but most people tend to not take it serious because they can't afford legal services. So we are saying, can development partners work with most of these organizations like the Uganda Law Society, GLOS, to help out these people to get free legal service? In that, if you aggrieved about a violation or an infringement, you will be able to get free legal services. You will be able to take on the big boys. You get. Then I think that's all with question number 4. I'll call upon the lady chair to take on question number 5. Thank you.
Number 5, what are the new or prioritized set of metrics and indicators needed for tracking our progress towards a healthier and more prosperous planet? So we adopted carrying out field surveys and monitoring tree planting, since it has been successful for different NGOs like Uganda's Little Hands Go Green. There is a use of smart technology where, for example, tree adoption Uganda uses remote and geosensing to know at what age and maturity that tree is at without physically going there. Carrying out different environmental audits on activities like tanning and production production of pesticides carried out in companies to see if they are compliant with their different environmental regulations. We earlier on realized that there are different environmental policies in place, even if we don't know them. So NEMA, the official environmental body, has different regulations in place for that. So if we could carry out environmental audits on activities in different companies, then yeah, we shall have a proper tracking progress. And then we could keep assessments and conduct assessments in institutions to the youth and children about the different climate education. This could be in form of exams or physical activities to see now if they can actually plant trees. Do they know that different weather? Do you know when to plant and when to harvest? And then we could keep track of the waste recycling process. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Again, the list was long. We shall do our level best in terms of cleaning and prioritizing. Any 2 quick responses on this presentation? Yes. Are you a group member or no? Okay, yeah. Any microphone somewhere? Or you can come and use this one in the interest of time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peace from Nile Girls Forum, and most of our activities are based in Zombo district. I just had an observation, but group 1 will correct me if I'm wrong. The second question that was talking about what are the actions that your group would take to tackle up change towards a healthy planet. There was a submission you made about getting rid of plastics. So I felt like that is something that we cannot just do as youth. We can only influence policy that can enable getting rid of the plastic. Because if we as space right now, we say we are going to get rid of plastics. Remember, there are factories that are still processing some of these plastics, polythene papers, it could even be plastic bottles. But if we can just come together and influence policy at the top level of decision makers where we create a movement, we could probably do like a peaceful demonstration or do like a social media awareness campaign that would actually trigger the policymakers to make an adjustment in the policy so that things like plastics are gotten rid of. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a policy issue. Yes, last one. Do we have a microphone at the back there, please?
Thank you. Thank you for the good presentation and well deliberated. So my main concern is, I've not really heard about a particular group of people. And when I look around this room, I'm talking about specifically when they're presenting about marginalized and they limited the definition to women, children, and youths. But I'm looking at the sex workers. Who is speaking for them in this room? Any hands up? I'm talking, no, this is not, I'm serious because we have to include, we have to be inclusive, isn't it? We are there's a group of people called the LGBTI something. Are they represented here? No, this is the reality. As we are submitting our inputs, no one is talking about their issues, isn't it? We are talking about issues of children. We are talking about issues of women. We are talking about issues of youths. So I think we should widen the definition within your context. Widen the definition of marginalized. Don't limit it to what we see here. Other than that, I think because of time, I'll limit myself to that. But don't hold me ransom because I spoke about that. But we need to speak about them and make them inclusive. Thank you.
Before I give my reaction to the two responses, I would like to thank you for your ideas. Firstly, I would like to correct you. Madam, I didn't get your name, I'm sorry. Madam, please, I would like to correct you. You had value. Of course, we have to work with the policies, but you cannot say us as youth, we cannot get rid of plastic bags. First of all, you were climate activists, right? Yes? So will you go and litter because there is no policy? It has to start with you. That is why we go ahead and plant a tree, whether we have capacity or not. That is why you go and pick polythene bags, whether the policies will come in and the funding will come in. But what are you doing as a person? Then number two, sex workers, they are women. They are youth, how old are they? So at the end of the day, the difference, maybe you're talking about helping them in as their category, but at the end of the day, they are women. So if the companies are partnering with SMEs, we are creating job opportunities for them. Yes, they just have choice.
It's now getting very interesting, but in the interest of time, I think we shall leave it at that. One quick announcement. My colleague Bob forgot a memory stick on the table there. If there is anybody who might have seen it, we urgently need it because we have very many documents on it. A memory stick that might have been misplaced, it was on that table. Kindly, if you see any, bring it to me. I thank you. Could we have the last group, last but not least? I think this will be the most important. This is the last. Group 3, I think it's group 3.
No, it's not this. I think it's there's some other document which is a PowerPoint, but not this one. Thanks so much, everyone. I am Edgar Mtungisa. I'm a student of petroleum engineering and environmental management at Mbara University of Science and Technology. Yes. Am I audible? How about now? Okay, yeah. So I'm Edgar Mtungisa. I'm a student of petroleum engineering and environmental management at Mbara University of Science and Technology. Yeah, and I'm also currently the East African Community Youth Ambassador to the Republic of Uganda. As some of you may be aware, today's sad news came in from the community that we lost a former president of Kenya, Kibaki. So it's not a good afternoon, definitely, for the community and of course for the rest of us that believe in that integration. Nonetheless, group 3, I think our presentation is going to be very brief. We're going to make it really brief, though it looks lengthy here, because I understand you guys must be tired. But before that, I would like to introduce, maybe to introduce, you can introduce himself, who was our rapporteur, the one who did this great work. Perhaps I think he's so much used to doing minutes, that's why it's so lengthy. Yeah, please, you can, yes, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Ivan Mushana, the team leader at Free Uganda Academy, located in Kanungu District, an environmental philanthropist and a champion, and I'm grateful to be part of this dialogue. At the end, I will just have a one-page summary in the form of a prototype and enhance our discussion.
Thanks so much. So the first question we had to address was, what are the biggest challenges we are facing in implementing the commitments to the 2030 agenda and other environmental commitments? And then how do we create an enabling environment for delivery on the ground? So the first challenge that we faced, that we found, was that most of the policies happening and the approach that we have as a government is top-down. The idea that all these things start from some good boardrooms, and by the time they reach the local people, or even within there, just in the middle in there is no much to disseminate, or there's not that much reach the local people. And so we found the solution to that would be more developed approaches by the government in policy formulation and decision making, so that we have the reverse. Instead of top down, we have down top, where the people on the ground are the ones who make these policies from the time when they're formulated, the time of order planning, and all those mechanisms, so they can be included. I think it's one of perhaps an initiative where such meetings lie, and we appreciate that. The other problem was the information gaps on the key recommendations, coupled with the lack of relevant knowledge and skills by the local players to meaningfully participate. We also recognize that whereas we can give platforms to these people, but most of these things, especially climate change issues, are a little technical. The extent that these people don't even understand them. That it's very possible for us to invite and take this platform to Mbarara, to our park and Rida, but if we still speak the language of biodiversity and then the NDCs and all that language that is complicated and technical, these guys won't fully comprehend. And at the point where they don't comprehend, then even when we give them these spaces, they sometimes become as good as nothing, because they simply come and let alone go home, and we found that to be very problematic. So there is a need for us to localize that discussion so that it can be easily comprehended by such people. And that, I think, thirdly, we had the issue on governance gaps, where we have weak leakages between governance structures that limits the flow of information. I think this is more related to the first one. So the explanation is almost the same. And lastly, we have the insufficient financial and material resources directed towards the research and implementation of these commitments. So we found out that there are very many people who have some developments, but then they have an issue of limited resources. to have them to fruition, and we think they could lead some increase in those kind of resources. I think we may proceed. So what are then the good practices and pathways that you would like to see scaled up to accelerate the implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development in the context of the decade of action? So one, the recommendations we had here, the good practices we thought that would be important was to have more investment in carbon capture technology. Whereas we understand, and whereas we all find believers, especially when you're an activist, the whole discussion we want to have is the idea of, we can stop the use of plastics, we can stop all these things, we can stop our consumption of coal. It's a good discussion, but sometimes it can be realistically ambitious. And so there's also sometimes to consider reality. So the extent where, for instance, we have more fumes, the fact that sometimes we may have some industries that we may not eliminate fully, what do we do to that kind of a discussion? So we recognize that beyond just mitigation, you might also need to do adaptation. And one of the mechanisms we can employ is this carbon capture technology. It's not that expensive as people think, because it's even already available in our context, even in some universities. Students are already captured, they're already advanced mechanisms that can capture carbon. So it's not that complicated and that expensive. Two, we recognize that we need to strengthen the implementation of environmental laws and bylaws. So here we had a very interesting conversation, and some of you here perhaps who have studied law, you understand the problems of international law, the idea that it's always based so much on goodwill. So there are no big repercussions as there ought to be in case someone did contrary to what those treaties perhaps portray. But beyond that, even environmental laws, we have some good laws here, I think. We have some laws of protection of wetlands and etc. But I recognize that those laws are not followed. But then in one of our groups, because I think our group had a lot of diversity, that people had different examples. One of our members told us about some village, I think some district, where the locals made their own bylaws. So leave alone your own constitution that is general and those acts. They have their wetlands that they recognize, they have their forests they recognize, and they have their own rules within that community. Should you infringe, or should you, in your way, poke your grid to their resources, to much trouble? So we're going to thought that it's important that we have that kind of localized, bylaws, and not necessarily with those the ones that are just generally to be reliable. Then lastly, we talked about the documentation and communication of the local indigenous knowledge and practices. Now, the concept here is that if some of you are Uganda or belong to some tribes, we find that there is a way some kind of totems would help us to save biodiversity. For instance, that when you are in this clan, certain clan, and there's something you can't eat, right? If it's maybe a tree or if it's some genre of a species, maybe like grasshoppers, and you can't eat them, in a way you're saving biodiversity, So we found that if this could be a discussion we can still have, so that we can be able to bring up that cultural perspective and popularize it, will be a very great thing. Now let's go to the third question: how to transform governance and legal systems that maintain long-term economic stability and ecological and social well-being for all. Now recognize the first one we discussed was to empower cultural leaders to come up with their own policies and recommendations. The recognition here, the most critical component here was that in most cases, we limit this discussion to only civil society organizations, perhaps, and maybe government entities. But we think cultural leaders play so much role because they have a lot of social buy-in from their people. So I think there's a need for us to empower them and have them to have a discussion on these policies, but also recommend their own kind of things that we should. Number two, we looked at increased oversight from civil society organizations. The concept here was that it's not enough for us to only have government institutions trying to transform governance. In case, let's say, government is faulty, then and the same government is tasked to do oversight on its own activities, it's a big problem. But when there comes in that kind of independent oversight, it's something that we need to encourage because it does help the government sometimes when it tries to shoot itself in the foot. Then we had also localized policies. So as we said last time, we cannot have fruition from such conferences when people don't understand them. I don't think if UNDP organized this conference and invited my village mates here, and the language they can't understand, so complicated. Even if you read the bylaws, they are still in the language they don't fully understand. I find it's important that we can go and do some translation of those bylaws, for instance, in their local languages. And this is consistent, I think, with one of the articles in our constitution that talks about how people need to know their rights and privileges. And in fact, the government has an obligation to have it translated in the local languages. So it's really a very important thing. The recognition here is, and it's very important, that for us to have a discussion about these climate issues and transform governance, but most important, as you see the question, ensure long-term economic stability and ecological well-being. It must not be an issue of boardroom discussions. It must be an issue that is people-driven. So that's the recognition of that idea. Then lastly, the cultural structures inclusion. I mean, that's like the same other way, how we need to include the cultural structures. Let's go to the third last question. What measures then are needed to align public, private, and development finance with existing commitments and priorities? The one thing we recognized here was the first one, though I think we start with the last one, the climate sensitive budgets. So that to us was the most important thing. Those of you who know Biden, and perhaps who follow him, know Biden, I think one of his favorite quotes, to me at least, is that show me your budget and I will show you priorities. So we think it's important that if we are to say that this is general issues, then that should not just be a discussion that we see on TV. It must be also reflected in the kind of budgets we pass in the parliament. We must see what kind of portion of the sector of the money is to allocate, for instance, to these ministries of energy, to the work around energy and climate action and all that. It's very important that our budgets reflect that kind of climate sensitivity. I think that was the most important one. And then the other one, we recognize the importance of enhancing those kind of partnerships between private, between private parties and public parties. I think it's very important. You can't work just alone. Yeah, so we thought that was one that we said there. Then here we're asking what type of partnerships, for instance, from the UN and beyond, are needed to accelerate a green and sustainable economic transformation that leaves no one behind. The first one was non-political partnerships that are open. The idea here is that if there's an issue and you want to solve climate change and you release calls, let it be to whoever it will concern, as long as the work is within climate change. Number two, we need regional partnerships. This was important, and I think this came majorly from me because I recognize that we can't work alone, especially when the entire region is now we are now no longer working in terms of nationalism. We get into terms of regional kind of balance. There already exists some policies at regional level that still recognize the importance of climate action regionally. So we think we need that kind of partnership that we ought to have. Number two is the technical and financial partnerships. The idea here is that beyond us just having people perhaps fund the ideas or call them, there is a need to first equip them with knowledge. There is need to do capacity building, give them the technical ability to understand and comprehend what you're talking about. But beyond that, give them the financial requirements that they would require. And lastly is the cultural partnerships, because we recognize how important it is that all these measures are localized. Because should they not be localized, then they'll only be best remain as just boardroom discussions, and we don't think that aids much. What is the... No, I think there's the last one. Yeah. So what capacities and technologies are needed to improve human well-being in harmony with nature? So in what capacities and technologies are needed to improve? One, we had carbon capture and carbon capture technology, and also making it affordable by the local farmers. Yeah, here's what I discussed last time. So we need more investment in that research so that we can have that level of adaptation achieved. Number two, there was the need to scale up renewable energy technologies like wind, hydro, and not just maybe fuel, because we need to recognize how we need to be transitioning from the old ways of just burning fumes and all those things that are not eco-friendly to such a future. Number three, we need to enhance and avail early warning systems in climate vulnerable communities. So here, the typical example was this issue of floods. I think Uganda has been struck by floods almost, I think, really in many instances. And yet we have some meteorological stations within some of these districts. The problem is that people that were there, I think one of our members commented on that because it comes from there, don't even know how to use those stations. The machinery there, they don't even know how to use it, but they have it. And so the situations like floods that they would have otherwise avoided still hit them anyways. So we thought it's very important that we enhance those systems, but most importantly, enhance the awareness of how to put them to use. Then lastly, awareness creation on the carbon markets and enhanced accessibility by the local farmer. Yeah, so there was a very big issue here on, I think again, from one of the examples from one of our good ladies there who deals in carbon markets. She thinks there is a limited awareness of how these markets operate, but also most importantly, there is a lot of ambiguity in what is the price, for instance, in relation to the indigenous kind of trees. So whereas you can't be able to trace the formula to have the prices for exotic breeds of trees, you can't find any for the indigenous kind of trees. We think we need to do that, and still again, it's all again in the context of being local and having it transformed to our own markets. Yeah, and then lastly, to also have the farmers have the capacity to understand how those markets operate, because they're again pretty complicated. Yeah, then lastly, we had increased carbon credit products is accessible by the local people. Yeah, I think this again was so much in line with whatever we already discussed below. However, in summary, what we needed holistically, if you forgot everything that was said in this presentation, given that you're already tired, in summary, what we discussed was we need systems and we need measures that are people-centered, but most importantly, those that are people-driven. And it's why almost throughout this presentation, I've been talking about localizing this, changing the language, up to local language. It is very important because it must be people-driven. And of course, it must be inclusive in terms of gender and all those other minority kind of situations. And most importantly, it ought to be regional. There has never been harm in, in synergy. I don't know if you find any, but there has never been any. Yeah. And then lastly, and most importantly, we ought to do follow-up. So whatever events that we do, for whatever kind of system, procedure aligned here, there must be follow-up. To what end were those results put to life? Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. I beg there is that, the page you played at first. In the interest of time, you may not mind about the words, but just the pictures that are there. Thank you very much. If you can magnify a bit so that those words are easily seen by the audience. So as earlier said, I'm Ivan Mushana, team leader at Uganda Academy, and I am one of the solution providers, the Panorama Solutions for a Healthy Planet. So I'm just presenting a prototype that has gone through several verifications, both national, regional, and international. And it covers most of the points we have discussed here. And one of the expectations I had is to learn from you guys, and at the same time, you also learn from me. So I hope I'm achieving one of my expectations. I've learned a lot from you, and I guess you also have a lot to learn from this prototype. It's a 9-step paged model, which we call a community engagement model. And we begin with the community mobilization, which is that number one. So number one is at the stage where we mobilize the people in the local communities and in schools in a group or a club that is doing conservation work. Once the group is formed, then we are very sure it has the governance at the local structure level, whereby the group must have leaders elected by the group members themselves. So once the group is formed, we enhance this group with bylaws or the constitution formed by themselves to govern them, and we help them register at the district level to attain recognition by the local government, meaning we have linked already the community with the government. This means that once the group is organized, I have put a VSLA model. It means they are now easily connected to the financial institutions or any other financial sources because they are already organized and they also have the VSLA element, meaning they're already managing the small savings they make themselves, which offer them capacity to even manage other external finances coming in. Once that is done, of course, we are sure there is awareness creation and building capacities for those people because they are easily traceable and we can create awareness, especially on the issues of the environment and climate change, meaning that they are local groups and the grassroots entrepreneurship hubs and the grassroots implementers of of the recommendations that we are discussing here today. So there is access to information and skills post enablement because information is power. Once they have access to information, it means they will have access to the information and the skills they need to participate meaningfully. Then stage number 4, it's gender equality observed at club or group level, meaning that at the group formation, there is gender sensitivity and that element is captured, especially to cater for both females and males and the marginalized groups we have talked about, especially those articles articulated in their group bylaws or constitution. So we are ambitious that entrepreneurship will be sparked at group level because there is collective visioning, there is knowledge sharing, and joint decision making. So meaning that once entrepreneurship comes in, they begin now creating possible investment opportunities and some projects are coming in, especially from brainstorming at group level. So, and there we are saying once that one is done, external partners will come in to support. So external partners, before they come, this tells us that there is a need we have to do first before we can expect the external support, especially the funders and those people philanthropic about the environment to help us. You can slide just a bit, scroll down a bit. Other players will come in. Once the group is in existence, there is some indicators of entrepreneurship and there is need for finance to support their initiatives. Then access to relevant ecosystem services is enabled because these groups already have had external partnership to support their entrepreneurial decisions. Once they have access to finance, there is enabled access to ecosystem services. We are taking an example of tree seedlings for these people to invest now and participate in real conservation work. So community participation is enabled because all this has been done, flow of knowledge, bylaws, etc. Now they are enabled to participate in environmental conservation and climate change mitigation. So that is our last part, number 9, where environment is conserved, which also say action on climate change. So this is the flow of actions that we came up with, especially incorporate everyone's decisions and ensure the community is actually participating. I thank you very much.
Let's give him another clap for successfully smuggling in this educative slide. Any quick comments for the last presentation, apart from the slide that was smuggled in? Come again? Yes, we have disassociated. But it was educative. It was educative. Yes. Quick comments. 2. Yes. And 1 from here. Quick ones. So ready for 30.
Asante sana. My name is Mate Jokas. I happen to be in group 3, though I'm a little bit happy somehow. Yes, so there are some things that we had mentioned, and when it comes to the last point, or you can merge it with the second question. The last point, which talks about capacities and technologies. Then if you look at the second point, good practices, that can be adopted by the government and even key players. So we wanted to avoid the word government, because if you say government, it means you are specific to only, let's say, for this case, the government of Uganda. So when you say key players, it means that everyone is inclusive, you and me. That's one. Two, when it comes to good practices that we would like to adopt, there are things which touch the grassroots person who are always left out. One was community-led development approaches, because this will help us to bridge the gap between the key stakeholders then to the grassroots person. Also designing approaches that are community-led. One of the challenges is that the SDGs and any other related environmental practices are top-bottom. That's true, but how best can we develop those approaches that are community-driven? Two is BMAT, which stands for Budget Monitoring and Expenditure Tracking. Feel free to use this information as you please and where you can squeeze it. Because when you look at the budgeting processes, most of the budgets are from top to the bottom. Prioritizing comes from how are they implementing what they have presented. There is no budget up to date where you say government put money here and they put there. I happen to be part of those who are monitoring government budgets and all that, and also drafting ministerial position papers. But even if you suggest something that you feel is comfortable with, they don't. So what can we do is to enhance the capacities of CSOs, young people, and all that, on how best can we monitor the already decided policies and budgets. Asante.
Thank you very much for that comment. Last but not least.
Thank you. Saving me the house of going to the front. Once again, to my group members, once again, my name is Sheila, but to the others, my name is Sheila Muhindo, and I work with Creations Forum Africa. Two groups that spoke, like the last two groups, spoke something about Article 5, and I have been compelled to say this, even when I didn't mean to. I hope I'm not charged. So I wanted to bring to attention that just as everyone else has, those two groups have spoken about the need for translating the Constitution and doing this so that people know that they know their rights, know what they're supposed to do, know, you know. So we know that we are the custodians. We are the custodians of this law. We are the custodians of everything that is around us. How do we do this? So I wanted to bring to attention that there is a group of vibrant youth at KIU that have started walking the talk. They have decided to buy constitutions of Uganda, and they are translating them, and they're going to take them. They're starting with Karamoja district in June. So if you want to support that cause, since I've seen that people have brought it up, you can please contact me and support that cause. Because the reason why people vandalize the infrastructure that is supposed to help them is because they do not know that the same people who are supposed to be protecting this particular infrastructure. I was telling my groupmates that I was in Bondivojo and I saw an UWA official selling firewood outside the Semliki Reserve. But you know that the people who are there are the ones who are supposed to take action. I'm like, why are you selling firewood? This is a reserve, this is supposed to be protected. But because they do not know that it is their role to protect and monitor and do the evaluation, they sit back and they're like, those things are for the government. You see a hospital shutting down because the medicine is being vandalized, but you sit down and say those things are for the government. So please let us effect, if the government has failed to effect Article 5, let us be the ones to effect it. So if you can support that good cause, right now we are collecting resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that useful input. Well, we are coming to the end of the day. We have had a long, fruitful day. You have given us very many ideas. What I'm promising is that we shall do our level best. We didn't have sufficient time to continue the filtration, which we should have done today. But we shall keep processing these ideas, combine them with what we shall be getting from the other groups. As you are aware, the whole of next week, we shall be consulting different stakeholders. Eventually, all these ideas will be aggregated, prioritized, and eventually we come up with a few recommendations that will be taken forward for validation. I take this opportunity to thank you very much for the active participation throughout the day. You are still very energetic and you have shown us that you can use your energy very effectively. We appreciate that. So we really thank you very much for coming and sparing this time, bringing your ideas forward. We shall not let you down. We shall do our level best in terms of processing. And as I said, post Stockholm conference, we shall see how to communicate this information back. Thank you very much. And with those few remarks, I now call upon Gloria from UNDP to come and give some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Tamathias Magunda, for the moderation. And on behalf of UNDP, I would like to thank you so much. I've not been to a workshop and on a Friday where we have a full room. So let's give ourselves a round of applause. I was telling my colleague that the demonstration that the youth showed, I wish even others would show. I would imagine if this was any other normal government workshop, I don't know if we will even have a half of this room. So thank you so much for your commitment. Thank you for the ideas you've shared. You have provided great input on the 3 leadership dialogues of the Stockhom+50. And I was really amazed because the ideas that came through in terms of what we need to do in terms of curbing pollution, plastics, and one thing I've realized is we need to walk that talk. When we came up with this idea that we don't need plastic bottles here, we're like, oh, how will people manage? But we've been able to drink water from glasses. So this is just small, but imagine we are over 100 people here. How much plastic? And we had 2 rounds of water, so this is around 200 bottles. How much of those would go in the streams, or would find maybe in Chinawataka or wherever, clogging the soils, blocking the streams, So I'd like to urge you to walk that talk. However small the initiative can be, it can make a difference. So the ideas you've given on the legislative frameworks, the ideas you've given on the policies, the incentives for the youth, and we're looking at the youth, but we are going beyond. We all want to survive. We need green jobs. Can you be ambassadors for green jobs? We've seen, if we had time, we know that many of you are doing amazing things. You're doing projects like Ivan presented. I know many of you are having a number of initiatives, so in energy, in agriculture, in forestry. This is amazing. We didn't have all the time, but one thing I want to urge you is continue the good work, continue doing what you're doing, continue being the ambassadors, the green ambassadors, and continue being passionate to do it. So we have to translate this information back to our fellow youth who are not here. Some of you have come from the districts, from the communities. Please take back this information. And as UNDP, I told my bosses, there is no better way to start these consultations than the youth. So you've given the example, you set the ball rolling. And next week, we are planning to have a series of consultations, as was earlier presented. We have the private sector, we have representatives from the district local governments at the regional level. We have the civil society organizations, we have the women. So we have a series of consultations, and then we are going to have also the national consultation where we bring everyone at the national level, and maybe you will also be able to be part of that national workshop, and then we'll have the final report, which will represent all the views you have shared. But as earlier mentioned, the event is going to happen in June, 2nd to 3rd of June in Stockholm, where the report is going to be presented, but we're not stopping at that level. So as UNDP, and also I know other government partners are spearheading a number of programs. So we want to see how the outcomes translate into concrete policy actions, not like it has been mentioned here. We all have the policies, the multilateral environmental agreements were all shared and all that, but how do we translate this into action? So we want the youth to spearhead these initiatives. As UNDP, we have the Youth for Business facility where a number of youth have been supported on small scale enterprises that are into climate action, environmental conservation, energy. So we'll continue to engage you. Please continue to engage us. I have my colleague, Mercy. Mercy, please wave. She's our youth focal point. So please engage us as much as possible. We'll be able to work with you and to translate these discussions into concrete action. We can only do our best. Each of us, let us do our best in whichever way, however small it is, we can make a difference. So on behalf of UNDP, I want to thank you so much. And as I mentioned, let's continue the discussion. Let's continue to be the ambassadors. Let's continue to create the change, however hard it is. There's a saying I always reflect on, sometimes the table is not created for you. It's not there, but you have to create it for yourself. So really optimize every opportunity you can get to make a change and to make a difference. Thank you so much for your presence. And for those who traveled from up country, as I mentioned, we'll be able to provide some small facilitation. I'm sorry, according to the policies, for those that traveled from Kampala, unfortunately, we don't, according to the policy, we don't provide facilitation. But for me, I look at it beyond that. You know, the energy and the time you have given is enormous. So we'll be in touch. And one thing I also wanted to mention is we have an online platform. It's called Spark Blue. I've shared this with Julie and Edwin, and I can share the links. We're going to share the links. The discussions are going to continue online. Please sign up to the Uganda webpage and follow the discussions, contribute, and engage us as much as possible. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your active participation. I wish you a very good weekend. Thank you. On administrative announcements, we have some tips. Please feel free to leave at leisure. Feel free to engage. I'm available, and in case you have any other issues or questions, please free to let me know. Thank you. Hi, everyone. IT. So the IT. Please help me put that QR code up. So many of you have been asking. So we have a Telegram group. The IT person is going to put the QR code up. Please scan it and then join the group where we share about different opportunities and meetings of the like. Thank you. put a QR code up. Go and share it, please. Yes.
Yes, colleagues, that's the QR code. So you just go with your phone and get a picture, then it will redirect you to Telegram. That's the group. I think Juliet is, chairing. Yeah. So you just go there, you get the camera of your phone, and it will redirect you to Telegram. That's just from there. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, we have a few calendars, so if you need one, you can just come and pick. First come, first serve, there are very few.